You could make the argument that no film series has impacted pop culture more than Star Wars. The original film released in 1977, and by all accounts, should have been a complete box office train wreck. It would go on to spark two direct sequels, a prequel trilogy, a sequel trilogy, a pair of spin off films, and numerous TV and streaming shows. That's not even counting the novels, merchandise, comic books, and video games. George Lucas turned a very simple hero story space opera into a financial and commercial juggernaut. If I just start listing off names, you're gonna immediately know exactly who I'm talking about. Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Darth Vader, Princess Leia, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Wait, let's try that last one again. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Chewbacca, Yoda, Lando, C-3PO, R2-D2, the Emperor, Darth Maul, Qui-Gon Jinn, Boba Fett, Jabba the Hutt, Padme, Watto, Finn, Rey, Poe, Snoke, Kylo Ren, the Mandalorian, Baby Yoda. Nearly every aspect of the Star Wars universe is unique and immediately recognizable. The Death Star, the Empire, the Rebellion, Tatooine. Star Wars even popularized a specific sound effect that's been used in dozens and dozens of other films and franchises, the Wilhelm scream. The films have had varying degrees of success and quality over the years. The original trilogy has always been the gold standard. The prequels were really disliked at first, but have seen a huge gain in popularity, especially thanks to online communities like Reddit. The sequel trilogy started off relatively well, but the last two films received, and pardon the pun here, lukewarm support from the fan community. Today I'm going to rank all 11 films from my least favorite to favorite. Now, I'm not dumb. I know which films are technically superior, most commercially viable, and more critically received. This is just my personal list, so take it with a grain of salt. Before we get started, click on the subscribe button and the notification bell. Now that all that's out of the way, let's go. Number 11, The Last Jedi. When they showed us the logo for Episode 8, it was this awesome red instead of the traditional yellow, and because I am a simple man who enjoys simple things, that got me hyped. Walking out of the theater, I had three thoughts in my head at the same time. First, this is the best looking Star Wars movie I've ever seen. Second, depending on what they do with the sequel, this might age pretty well. Third, why in the world did they kill off Snoke and completely change the character of Luke Skywalker? I understand and appreciate Johnson's desire to subvert audience expectations and give the fans something they haven't seen before, but by giving a huge middle finger to anyone who likes Luke Skywalker and killing your main villain, you yank the rug out from underneath potentially the two best things about your movie. The fact that Mark Hamill himself has been so outspoken about Luke's treatment really should tell you all you need to know. He is the hero of Star Wars, and nobody has been more upset with the character's treatment than him. The Last Jedi also has the cringe-inducing political commentary, completely ruins the character of Finn, answers none of the questions asked by The Force Awakens, and sets up this weird will they won't they power dynamic between Rey and Kylo that he then refuses to actually say anything about. Speaking of ruined characters, don't even get me started on Rose and Vice Admiral Holdo. Nothing against either actress, but these are the two most poorly written characters in all of Star Wars. There are two things about The Last Jedi that I did appreciate. One, the movie looks absolutely fantastic. The space battles are by far the best looking in Star Wars, and the throne room fight sequence looks particularly great. 2, Chewbacca flying the Millennium Falcon on Crate is just awesome. He's doing the whole thing by himself and just kicking all kinds of ass. Unlike Rey, we actually know that Chewie has experience flying the Falcon, and it's easily my favorite part of the film. Johnson's decision to leave the Resistance in shambles is not good, because you basically set up the entire conclusion for complete failure. There are like 15 people on board the Millennium Falcon, and that's all they have left to oppose the First Order. They have no weapons, they have no ships, they have no leadership. Admiral Akbar is dead, Luke Skywalker is dead, they have no base, and they don't have any support outside of this one ship because nobody comes to help them at the end. I've heard The Last Jedi apologists compare the ending of this film to The Empire Strikes Back, but they're making a very hollow case. Luke gets his hand chopped off and Han gets captured by Boba Fett. That's a far cry from almost everyone being, dead. Kathleen Kennedy deserves a ton of blame here for both giving Johnson the keys to the castle and then removing Colin Trevorrow from Episode 9 and replacing him with J.J. Abrams. The Trevorrow movie actually sounded kinda awesome. Too bad we'll never get it. Instead, we got number 10, The Rise of Skywalker. Honestly, I went back and forth between this and The Last Jedi as my least favorite Star Wars film. As a huge fan of big spectacle finales, I really wanted them to wrap this up right, but it was apparent from the very first trailer that this was going to be a bumpy ride. J.J. Abrams' decision to bring back Emperor Palpatine and shoehorn him into the sequel trilogy was an unmitigated disaster. There's no hint of any of this in The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi. By bringing back a character who by all accounts is straight up dead without any sort sort of plausible explanation doesn't make you just look like you have no idea what you're doing. It completely ruins the entire Skywalker saga. The first two trilogies were about the rise, fall, and redemption of Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader. By bringing back Palpatine, you have undercut the ending of Return of the Jedi and wasted Anakin's sacrifice. The man was willing to die to save his son, and you gave him the middle finger and disregarded the very decision that defined his legacy. It's pretty lame that a movie called The Rise of Skywalker elevates Palpatine's granddaughter over Anakin. This isn't the only thing I dislike about this movie, so here is the rest. J.J. Abrams crams so much setup in the first 15 minutes that it's nearly impossible to keep up with what's happening. Between the Sith Wayfinder and this ancient dagger, The Rise of Skywalker is just non-stop MacGuffin after MacGuffin. I'm not going to get into this, just look up Rise of Skywalker dagger on YouTube and have fun. There are other people who have talked about this extensively if you're interested. Killing off one of your main characters and then pulling the rope-a-dope, hey, just kidding, they're actually alive routine is one of the laziest tropes in filmmaking and one that the Star Wars films have avoided entirely. Well, if you like that dumb crap, I've got great news for you. Rise of Skywalker essentially does this twice, with both Chewbacca getting blasted to bits by Rey and C-3PO getting his memory wiped. It's lazy storytelling at its absolute finest, and Episode 9 is more than happy to do it. The lightsaber fight on Endor. How is the Death Star still partially intact? This is one of the dumbest things in all of Star Wars, and the actual fight choreography is just awful and boring. This is a huge problem with the entire sequel trilogy, and I'll get into it more when I talk about the other films. Rey and Kylo's storyline felt like it was going nowhere for 2 full movies, and then they try to wrap it up here and all just rings hollow. Rey adopting the Skywalker name and burying Leia's lightsaber. This is ham-fisted and it desperately tries to push on that nostalgia button, but simply does not work. I'm the nostalgia guy and I hated it so much. The last bullet point I want to hit on also applies to The Last Jedi. Near the beginning of Episode 9, one of the characters says that the Final Order attack is going to commence in 16 hours. Guys, I watched this movie and there's absolutely no way that all of this would fit into less than 1 day. Episode 8 does the exact same thing, but with even less time. These are the 2 worst Star Wars movies and they don't seem to have even the most basic concept of time. Also, fuel is a thing now? J.J. Abrams clearly understands that Rian Johnson ruined Star Wars, and The Rise of Skywalker spends 2.5 hours trying to fix it. Instead, he panders to the audience and just makes things exponentially worse. I cannot talk about this movie anymore. Number 9, Attack of the Clones. My opinion on this has warmed slightly over time, but that doesn't mean that it's a good movie. While the film looks great and actually does a solid job forwarding the story of the Jedi Order and the Republic, the love story between Anakin and Padme is straight up garbage. Hayden Christensen's performance as the man who will become Darth Vader is awful in this. He's given some truly cringe dialogue and was simply not the right guy for the part at this stage in his career. There's a huge leap between his performances in episodes 2 and 3, but Lucas's decision to make Anakin into this teenage spoiled man baby is a big part of the problem. Of all 3 mainline prequel films, Attack of the Clones has the most problems with the story. Padme goes from being creeped out by Anakin's awkward advances to wanting to smash as soon as he confesses to slaughtering a village of sand people. As bad as the acting is, I'll say this: Ewan McGregor is the perfect Obi-Wan and he actually develops as a character. His side story involving the clone army actually holds up well over time, and he's absolutely the highlight of the film. Speaking of highlights, watching Yoda hop around like a coked up Kermit the Frog is thoroughly entertaining, and Christopher Lee makes every movie better just by being a participant. It's still not good, but it's not completely unwatchable. Number 8, The Force Awakens. The hype around the release of this film was absurd. The marketing, trailers, merchandise, all of it pointed to Disney flexing all of their muscle to milk every possible ounce out of Star Wars. As a result, the movie hauled in a completely ridiculous $936 million at the box office just in the United States. That's $78 million more than Avengers Endgame, which is the biggest overall moneymaker in history. The critics adored it, and so did audiences. Star Wars was back. Isolating it from its garbage sequels, Episode 7 is a good movie that makes some iffy decisions along the way. The biggest criticism of the movie is that it's essentially a remake of A New Hope, and that's a fairly accurate description. The character of Rey is extremely overpowered right off the bat. She can fly the Millennium Falcon with 0 training, can use the Force with 0 training, and is capable of wielding a lightsaber with, once again, 0 training. Some of this is later explained by her heritage, but looking back, it's crystal clear that Disney had no plan laid out for the trilogy. They were just going to roll in 3 different directors and let them do what they wanted with the story. For a company that keeps a tight hold on its intellectual properties, the decision to go in this direction is a strange one. As for the movie itself, Daisy Ridley proves herself an exceptional performer, and the same goes for John Boyega and Oscar Isaac. The 3 actors have great chemistry, even though the 3 of them never actually appear on screen until the very end of The Last Jedi. Adam Driver does good work with a villain that appears to be one note, but has far more depth than it is initially let on. The Force Awakens excels with the reappearance of Han Solo and Chewbacca, and manages to hit all the right nostalgia notes as a result of their participation. While the action here is beautiful looking, the lack of, again, an incredible lightsaber fight in the trilogy really stands out. The snow fight in the forest between Rey and Kylo is fine, but the actual choreography leaves a lot to be desired. There's more awesome lightsaber fighting in the first 15 seconds of the Anakin-Obi-Wan showdown in Episode 3 than there is in all of the sequel trilogy combined. Force Awakens isn't a bad movie, it's just filled with a lot of missed opportunities. Number 7, Solo. Ah yes, the Han Solo origin story that absolutely nobody asked for. You might be surprised to see the youthful adventures of the galaxy's favorite scoundrel so high on my list. While Solo certainly underperformed at the box office, it's not the disaster that everyone was expecting. This is quite surprising considering the film went through substantial reshoots after Kathleen Kennedy fired the directors in the middle of production. Ron Howard picked up the torch mid-sprint and actually did an admirable job of putting together a watchable and fun movie. Does Solo have problems? Absolutely it does. Darth Maul's in the movie for satisfying the requirement that all Star Wars movies at least show a lightsaber at some point. It also plays up Han Solo's dice to a nearly comedic effect, and Paul Bettany's villain is undercooked. Issues aside, the movie has a handful of laugh-out-loud moments, and the way Chewie and Han meet is clever. Plus, the movie has Emilia Clarke and Woody Harrelson, so they're both awesome, duh. Number 6, The Phantom Menace. While this movie came out when the internet was still very much a baby, the hype surrounding it was still fairly insane. The marketing was slick. The first trailer had pod racing, Liam Neeson, the underwater creature, Samuel L. Jackson, Jar Jar Binks getting his head zapped by purple lightning, and Darth Maul. While the excitement around the release was huge, the end result left a lot to be desired. The movie has everything you would expect from a Star Wars film: galactic politics, Jedi Masters and Sith Lords, tons of lightsaber action, and the memorable pod racing sequence. It was also undone by some wooden acting from Natalie Portman, the simple existence of Jar Jar Binks, and the origin story that absolutely nobody wanted. If they would have given us a teenage angst Anakin in this movie for the first time, that would have been a little bit better, but not by much. George Lucas seemed like he might have been high on his own supply, with nobody to tell him that maybe Jar Jar wasn't nearly as funny as he thought. While there's a lot to criticize about the film, at least it understands the basic universe. Number 5, A New Hope. Star Wars was originally just called that, Star Wars. It would later be renamed Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Well, when Star Wars was released after very challenging production, it was a massive hit. It won critical acclaim to the tune of a handful of Oscar nominations and turned its $11 million budget into a completely wild $775 million. It made $220 million just in the United States alone, which would have been about $1 billion today. It surpassed Jaws as the biggest moneymaker in history and made George Lucas into one of the richest men on planet Earth. It also revolutionized filmmaking, created the biggest box office franchise in the world, and turned science fiction into a financially bankable genre. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but everyone in America knows Star Wars, and nearly everyone has some sort of emotional connection to the franchise. I mean, watching them for the first time is nearly a rite of passage. Growing up, I always liked A New Hope, but didn't love it nearly as much as the films higher on my list. The effects are still groundbreaking for a film made in 1977, but it's still very much a movie of its time. When you compare it to its much better sequels, it's hard to look back at A New Hope as anything more than a charming, competent, fun space opera. That said, the film does introduce us to some of the most iconic characters in film history. Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker, Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia, Harrison Ford's Han Solo, and Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan Kenobi have all become household names. The same can certainly be said about R2-D2, C-3PO, and Chewbacca. Perhaps the biggest name of all of these is Darth Vader, the hulking mass of a man who carries a red lightsaber and can choke a man to death without even touching him. James Earl Jones's iconic voice has become synonymous with the evil villain, and Vader is considered to be one of the best and most influential villains in all of pop culture. A New Hope remains highly watchable and fun even after all this time. Number 4, Rogue One. Rogue One was the the second Star Wars film released after Disney acquired the property and had a number of things going against it. First, it was set outside of the sequel trilogy, taking place well after Revenge of the Sith and immediately before A New Hope. As a result of this unknown time and setting, it simply didn't get the same amount of hype. Second, while there are a handful of supporting characters that we recognize, such as Darth Vader, Grand Moff Tarkin, and Mon Mothma, the main cast is comprised of all new characters. Third, Rogue One went through fairly substantial reshoots and had its own share of behind-the-scenes drama. Despite those potential issues, Rogue One manages to somehow inject a fair bit of humor into a decidedly depressing affair. Alan Tudyk's K2SO is the funniest droid in Star Wars, but you can forget about happy endings here. All of the characters we spend 2 hours getting to know and love die horrible deaths in service of a greater purpose. Based on simple dialogue from the previous films, we always knew that the Rebel Alliance made great sacrifices in order to obtain the plans for the Death Star, but now we get to see all of that firsthand. It's also a gorgeous movie, and director Gareth Edwards' visual style is given ample space to shine. If there's one element that does hurt Rogue One, it's the music. There's nothing particularly wrong with Michael Giacchino's score, but John Williams is as much a part of Star Wars as anyone, and his abilities as a composer are sorely missed. Now let's dig into my top 3 favorite Star Wars movies. Number 3, Revenge of the Sith. While Attack of the Clones was a tremendous disappointment, Episode 3 was the exact opposite. Hayden Christensen's performance here is so much better, not just because of the dialogue, but because of his growth as an actor. He's not Daniel Day-Lewis or anything, but the improvement is noticeable almost immediately. New characters like General Grievous inject just the right amount of menace and humor into what understandably turns out to be a decidedly depressing finale. Understandably, Anakin's deteriorating relationship with the Jedi Council and his mentor Obi-Wan are the centerpiece of the narrative, and Chancellor Palpatine's influence on a confused and angry young mind makes for some surprisingly tense drama. This also happens to be far and away the best looking of the entire prequel trilogy. Despite the occasional bits of wonky CGI, the final battle between Master Obi-Wan and his fallen apprentice lives up to the hype. While it drags on a bit too long and gets kinda weird when they start climbing on poles and jumping on floating lava platforms, the coordination here is fantastic. Watching both men spin their lightsabers around their backs and over each other's heads is pretty awesome, and it's clear that either of these guys could dispatch Rey or Kylo within 30 seconds. The talent disparity in the fight coordination between the prequels and the sequels cannot possibly be overstated. Lightsabers are an integral part of Star Wars, and I'm just astonished at how much better they are here. The overall ending of the film works fine, but there are definitely some questionable choices. First, Obi-Wan chops off like all of Anakin's limbs and then just leaves him there to burn and die. I understand that if he kills his friend, we wouldn't, have any more movies, but there had to be a better way to handle this. He literally walks up to his dying apprentice, picks up his lightsaber, and then leaves. Second, when the Emperor retrieves Anakin and reassembles him as Darth Vader, the whole thing is just strange. I don't know if that's the CGI or James Earl Jones's voice work, but the sequence is meant to be tragic and ends up being laughably silly. Lastly, we need to talk about Padme. I've seen pregnant human females before. There's absolutely zero way that this woman is pregnant with one baby, let alone twins. Maybe if Leia was like a half a pound at birth, I could buy this, but nope, not pregnant, not even a little bit. And what's up with her just popping out each baby in 5 seconds and then dying? The robot doctor's like, she lost the will to live and then she just dies. That's not how dying works, and it seems like a woman who just had twins would maybe not want them to grow up as orphans. Revenge of the Sith, not a perfect movie by any stretch, but still a really good one. Number 2, The Empire Strikes Back. This was my second favorite Star Wars movie growing up, and it's my second favorite Star Wars movie now. It would be disingenuous to put it anywhere else on my list, but that takes nothing away from it as a film. The Empire Strikes Back is a masterpiece. It's such a vast improvement from A New Hope that it changes how you go back and watch the first film. Darth Vader, who clearly didn't like a group of rebellious kids blowing up his engineering project, turns into a raging sociopath who kills his employees if they even look at him wrong. His transition underscores one of the best things about Empire, which is a far more serious tone. Luke's training with Yoda on Dagobah shows Luke that the life of a Jedi is far more than simply using a lightsaber, and also foreshadows his impending showdown with Vader. Han and Leia's romance begins to take form, with both of them finally realizing how much they really care for each other. While the movie does tend to drag just a little bit in the middle, it has such a powerful ending that makes up for any of its shortcomings. Vader capturing Han Solo on Cloud City and then luring Luke into a trap shows that he's not just a capable warrior, but a brilliant and cunning strategist. When they finally come to blows with their lightsabers, it's a huge spectacle. Vader uses all of his training and knowledge of the Force to just wipe the floor with Luke, and after he pleads with him to turn to the dark side, he uses the last tool in his arsenal: the truth. Vader beats him with a lightsaber, cuts off his hand, and when Luke is there drenched in sweat, exhausted and wounded, Vader uses emotional manipulation to turn Luke against Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. And when Darth Vader, the most evil man in the galaxy, reveals himself as Anakin Skywalker, Luke's father, the tension and dread is very real. Actor Mark Hamill was the only member of the cast who even knew this was the case. The line in the script was, "Obi-Wan killed your father," but when James Earl Jones recorded his lines, it was changed to the iconic moment we now know. Not even the man in the suit, David Prowse, knew what the real dialogue was. He found out in the theater along with the rest of the cast. The Empire Strikes Back is a masterpiece. Great production values, a perfect story, rock-solid performances, and one of the best endings in movie history. Number 1, Return of the Jedi. I know. You're probably thinking that The Empire Strikes Back is the greatest Star Wars movie, and you know what? Maybe you're right. But for me, Return of the Jedi has the best set pieces, the best opening scenes, and the best ending of the entire saga. In the beginning of this movie, Luke Skywalker shows up on his home planet of Tatooine. He sends in R2-D2 and C-3PO as decoys, waltzes up to Jabba the Hutt's palace dressed in all black, walks right through the front door, chokes out the first 2 guards using nothing but the Force, mind tricks Jabba's weird vampire sidekick, and threatens to kill everyone in the room unless his friends are released. He does all of this without a weapon. He had already given R2-D2 his lightsaber. Jabba does get the better of him for like a second and drops the unarmed Jedi into a pit with the Rancor, but Luke then just drops a door on his head and leaves the beast dead. Jabba is understandably displeased with this result and sentences our hero and his friends to immediately be put to death. Luke gets out of this too, with R2-D2 sending his lightsaber across the sand, where Luke ignites his brand new green instrument of death and starts killing all the bad guys here. The whole sequence ends with a dead Jabba the Hutt and not a single casualty for the good guys. Oh, and did I mention that Jabba is dead because Leia was chained to him and then used that very chain to strangle him to death? My point is, everything about the beginning of this movie is awesome. And guess what? The rest of the movie is awesome too. We get a surprising and emotional death scene for Yoda, a blistering speeder chase on Endor, and the reveal that Luke and Leia are twins, separated at birth for their own protection. While many people take issue with the introduction of the Ewoks, this seems a bit picky to me, and the scrappy little creatures play an important role in bringing down the Death Star's shield generator. As good as all of this is, it's overshadowed by the fantastic ending in the Emperor's throne room. Luke Skywalker, under the impression that his friends are all going to die, fights Vader for a second time, overwhelms his father with his improved skills, and inches right up to the edge of the dark side before relenting and casting aside his weapon. At this point, Luke Skywalker, the hero of the rebellion, is willing to die for his father, a man who has done things so unspeakably evil that he might very well be past the point of redemption. To me, this is the defining moment of the Skywalker saga, with Vader returning to the light and saving his son from death at the Emperor's hands. Everyone has their favorite Star Wars moments, and to me, these moments, the opening sequence and the ending, are the reason I love Luke Skywalker and the very reason that I love Star Wars. The production values are great. Lando is awesome, Chewie, Han, Leia, the music, but to me, the father-son relationship is what Star Wars is all about, and I'm proud to call it my favorite Star Wars movie. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider both sharing it and subscribing to the channel. Sound off down in the comments. Let me know what you think of my ranking of the Star Wars films, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.